because the Lord told me, he said, I am not done with America. Amen. He said, there's going to be a new wave of patriotism coming out. And that's whenever I saw Trump, and I saw a red wave coming out of Michigan. And then I saw Oklahoma, and there was embers of people, and they were all on they had torches all throughout Oklahoma, and they were raising up these torches that looked like fire. And they were bringing forth a new patriotism upon the nation. And it was being birthed, and it just kept spreading like fire all throughout America, all throughout. And I saw Trump rising up, and then I saw an attempt on his life. This bullet flew by his ear, and it came so close to his head that it busted his eardrum. And I saw he fell to his knees during this time frame, and he started worshiping the Lord. He got radically born again during this time frame. I'm talking, people say he's saved now, but he becomes really on fire for Jesus, for what I saw coming. And then I saw people interceding I saw him winning the presidency through great. The Lord showed me it would go clear into the summer. Great persecution would come on him through the judges and through the law and all these people trying to sue him and all this stuff. But there would be a stop to it, and things would start to break free come toward the fall. And then I saw him winning the election through the Patriots coming out and voting.
That, my friends, is an Oklahoma pastor by the name of Brandon Briggs, who you just heard describe in vivid detail a prophetic vision he had months ago of an assassination attempt on President Trump's life. A vision that was uncannily similar to what the entire world witnessed this past weekend. What you're seeing here is an American flag that was flying at Trump's rally in Pennsylvania. The wind tangled it into the shape of a guardian angel just before he came on stage. Gang, we all collectively saw a true miracle of God. And in this video, I want to reveal to you what that miracle really was. As I'm just going to speak from the heart here. As many of you know, I was in New York over the weekend. My wife and I were visiting my oldest daughter, who's living and working in New York. And we were having an early dinner in a Manhattan restaurant on Saturday evening. And there we were in the restaurant, yada, yada, yada. And it was probably around, it was early. It was 6:15, maybe 6:20 in the early evening. And my phone went off, and it was a text from my son, my youngest. And it just said, Dad, you have to see what just happened to Trump. And gang, my heart sank. When I read that, my heart sank. I knew it. I mean, we've been talking about this now for what? Trump's safety, we've been talking about for weeks now, our concerns over it. I knew the moment I read that, I knew that in mere seconds, I was going to be reading about Trump having been shot. I mean, there was no doubt about it in my mind whatsoever. And so I remember I was sitting at the table. My hands are shaking as I pulled up my Twitter feed, my X feed, and lo and behold, the very first tweet I see is from NWokeness, one of my favorite accounts. Huge shout out to you. Trump was just shot on live TV. This is the very tweet, what you're seeing right here. This is the very tweet that I first saw. Trump was just shot on live TV. And of course, at that exact moment, we didn't know his condition. So the tweet exhorted all of us to, quote, please stop what you're doing and pray. And so after I said a prayer, I continued to scroll through the frantic tweets. And then, like so many of you, I encountered this. That moment, that historic, iconic moment of Donald Trump rising up, blood spilling down the side of his head, not knowing the full extent of his injuries, not knowing what would become of himself, he stood up, his hand raised high in the air, and without a shred of thought for himself, he shouted out to all of those patriots that surrounded him, all the patriots across the nation, indeed all of the world, he shouted out 3 times, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" It literally was like it was coming out of the mouth of William Wallace, calling on his fellow countrymen to rise up and fight for their freedom, no matter what happens to him. Or we could think of that wonderful scene from the Two Towers, from the Lord of the Rings series, that beautiful scene when Frodo began to despair and asked Sam what could possibly keep them going in the midst of all this hell that's been unleashed on Middle-earth. And Sam said it so beautifully, "We have to keep going, just like the heroes of old kept going. They had so many chances to back out of it, but they kept going because they were holding on to something." And Frodo desperately asked, "What are we holding on to, Sam?" And Sam looked straight into his eyes and he said, "That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for." There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. Ronald Reagan himself said it. Freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Handed on to them for them to do the same, to fight for and defend our freedom. What I'm about to say to you, I say as a trained theologian. If you don't know, my doctorate is actually New Testament and early Christianity. That's how I came across what's called post-secular studies, and how I discovered the rise of a new conservative age, the end of a liberal era and the rise of a conservative religious era. So what I'm about to say to you, I am saying as a trained theologian. What we all witnessed together on Saturday was a literal, bona fide miracle. If you didn't believe in miracles before, sorry, you ain't got no excuse now. If you want a sense of just how miraculous this was, take a look at this. This is a graphic of just how close, how infinitesimally close Donald Trump came to certain instant death. I mean, we're talking literally millimeters. Forget the freaking inches talk. We're talking millimeters. Had he not turned his head again just ever so slightly out of the way of that bullet, the catastrophe that we would have all witnessed on live television would have been more than any of us could bear. Make no mistake, we were spared far more than a national trauma. We were spared what would have been one of the most catastrophic moments in modern politics anywhere in the world. And it may have been the event that ripped our nation apart forever. It would have been a catastrophe of monumental proportions. And instead, what happened? The bullet not only zipped millimeters from Trump's head, nicking his ear, but Trump rose from what would have been one of the single most traumatic events in all of modern politics, and he transformed it into the single most iconic moment of triumph and victory. He turned certain death into spectacular defiance. He turned a moment that would have torn our nation apart and transformed it into a moment when we, the people, became more united than ever before. This is the miracle. This is the transformative miracle we all witnessed on J13. And we have to ask, how did that miracle happen? How on earth was a catastrophic, world-altering moment transformed into the single most iconic image of triumph and victory? And again, as a trained theologian, I will tell you precisely what happened. You happened. Here's what I tweeted out that night at 6:56 p.m. Quote, make no mistake, tens of millions of prayers for this man over the last several years were the shield that protected him this day. Do you know what time those shots rang out? It was 6:11 p.m. 6:11. Ladies and gentlemen, Ephesians 6:11. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand firm against the tactics of the devil. You were that armor of God. You. Your prayers, the tens of millions of prayers that have covered Donald Trump over these last several years, formed the armor of God that protected that man. You. The patriots that were there at the rally, who spotted the gunman before the Secret Service even did, and alerted authorities precisely because of your own diligence and care for President Trump and for one another. You spotted him, and apparently all that attention forced the shooter to hurry his shots, and that contributed to causing him to miss. You did that. And I want to share with you another miracle that happened to my wife and I that night that absolutely confirms all of this. Later on that night, my wife and I mean, obviously we were emotionally drained, but we decided to take a cab ride back to our hotel. So we flagged down a taxi, just a random taxi in downtown Manhattan, right? Where Democrats literally outnumber Republicans, 8-1? So just a random taxi, right? And so the cab pulls up to the curb, and the driver is clearly a Sikh fellow, a follower of Sikhism. So he's wearing his turban. It turns out he was from the Punjab region in India. And so he welcomed us into his cab with a very inviting and warm, friendly Indian accent. And we weren't 30 seconds into the cab ride before he asked if we heard about what happened to President Trump. And so we said, of course, and how shocking it was and how tragic it was for our nation, and, you know, why someone would do something like this, why he has to go through this. And so we, of course, mentioned the horrible tragedy of the loss of that dear, beautiful patriot in the audience who died shielding his family from the bullets. And, you know, my wife and I were just trying to find some common ground that anyone could agree with, regardless of your politics, your partisan allegiances. And then this cab driver, this random cab driver, said something I never imagined ever hearing in downtown Manhattan. He said it so boldly and confidently. I thank God Almighty for sparing Donald Trump because we need him now more than ever. I kid you not. And it wasn't just how bold he said. I mean, it's not that I just... He had no intimidation whatsoever to say. He didn't know who we were. If anything, he probably assumed we were just a couple of libs visiting liberal Mecca, right? Manhattan. And then, as if my wife and I weren't blown away enough, he kept saying, he went on, I love Donald Trump. I believe he's the true leader of this great and wonderful nation, and I'm so thankful God protected him this day. And my wife and I were almost in freaking tears. And we share with how much we love Trump and how we got to meet him at Mar-a-Lago some months back. And yes, how we truly believe God intervened for the whole world to see. Trump, of course, has since come out and said that. But then it's what he said next, gang. It's what he said next that finally brought it all home for me. He said, did you see the people there at that rally? Did you see all those patriots surrounding him, ducking down to avoid the bullets? They didn't know how many shooters there were. They didn't know anything. All they could do was hear the shots and watch Trump fall. And he said to us, any other crowd would have run in panic. They would have stampeded all over each other just to get out of the way. But not that crowd. Not a Trump crowd. And as God is my witness, he said, they stood their ground. Those brave patriots stood their ground because all they cared about was Trump. They didn't care about their own safety. They didn't care about themselves. They cared only for the safety of others. That cab driver, that beautiful, wonderful man noticed something that night that no one else had yet seemed to notice, including myself. The only reason why Trump could rise up with his hand defiantly raised and exhort all of us to keep on fighting is because our fellow patriots at that rally stood their ground. They stood with him. They could have turned back, but they didn't. And how did Trump respond to that? Fight. 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 And how did those patriots who stood their ground respond? With chants of USA, USA, USA. If you didn't believe in miracles before, then I want you to get up. I want you to go stand in front of a mirror and look into the eyes of one now.